Okay, we're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the House Economic Matters Committee. Today is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020, and we are here today for a committee briefing with the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce, Secretary Schulz. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, as well as the members. It's good to once again be back with you all on this nice June day. As we know, there's been so much going on with COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on a number of the services that the state provides. At this briefing, in part, Madam Secretary, we have you here. We'd like to have you talk with us about some of the, I guess, the grants that were provided through CARES and the state. If you can get us started, I believe you have a presentation for us. And then if we have a couple questions afterwards, we can entertain the questions. I'd ask the members to write down any questions they have if they haven't already done so. And we will get started on the Q&A portion after we get through your presentation, Madam Secretary. So without further ado, if you can get us started.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And thank you to Vice Chairman Dumais. It's been a while since I've heard your voice, Vice Chairman, so it's nice to hear you on this as well. And to all of the committee members of the Economic Matters Committee, I very much appreciate the invitation to speak with you all today. And I sincerely hope that you, your families, your community are healthy and safe. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to address this committee today, as well as it being a public forum so that we can continue to update the community on our behalf. But this is far from the first time that our department has spoken to legislators on these issues. We have done at least 100 virtual town halls, community meetings, local chamber events, and industry webinars. We have answered every question to the best of our ability at the time that they have been asked, and we are grateful to have that participation from hundreds, if not thousands of businesses. Before I begin the slide presentation, I would like to say a few words about how some of the communication has gone to this point. Since the grant and loan relief funds were announced on March 23rd, the team at the Department of Commerce has, amongst other things, been criticized for the work that they are doing in attempting to efficiently and expeditiously put out funding to the businesses who need it the most. And I completely understand the frustration that has resulted from the prolonged process. But it is a process. I have in the past been asked by some members of the General Assembly to just put aside any process or methods to protect the taxpayer dollars that have gone into the relief programs so that the funds could be sent out quickly. I am here to say that as much as I want to provide relief to our businesses, I also took an oath of office that I would represent the state to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of the Secretary. With that in mind, there have been decisions made by me in order to ensure that the funds that left our office were accounted for, and that when an audit is conducted in the future, the team that I lead will have known that their integrity was not compromised. I want to be very clear. There are few others in the state who want to get the funds out more than my team. They are dedicated, hardworking public servants whose job has always been to promote business expansion and attraction in the state. Their entire mission throughout their professional career has been the growth of the economy. Prior to March, they were doing a pretty extraordinary job. Now their mission is slightly different, striving to simply sustain businesses at the very least. They take that responsibility very, very seriously, but there have been some uncomfortable moments over the past several months. They have at times received very vocal criticism for their participation in working on processing these grants and loans by members of the General Assembly. Frankly, that's wrong. In those cases, I've asked those members to communicate with me directly, and I continue to do so today. I think that we all agree that the state employees and Marylanders in general are working in environments that they have not had any experience in the past. In addition to that, many of our team members are themselves at high risk, have family members who are at high risk, or perhaps even trying to homeschool their own children. They, like you and your constituents, deserve respect and understanding. We will discuss throughout this upcoming PowerPoint presentation the process we have been working through since March 23rd. I'm pleased to say that we are making a great deal of progress. I have seen that many of the questions that have been asked by the committee are not going to be answered today because we are still processing the loans and grants. Collecting data on the entire universe just simply does not make sense. It would be incomplete at best and inaccurate at worst. It is in nobody's best interest to report inaccurate information. One last point before moving to the slides. There have been questions about whether or not it would have been prudent to hold off on the program until we had the system completed. This, in hindsight, could have been one of many possibilities. However, in contact with all of my colleagues from across the country on a weekly basis, there are many pros and cons to that as well. Many states are just now putting their state relief programs in place. For 3 months, their business community has been wondering if the state would provide any assistance to them. I am very proud to say that Maryland put this program in process very quickly, prioritized our business community, developed best practices, and now has made significant progress. And with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I would like to move on to slide number 2, which talks additionally about the grant program. I'll start with our Small Business Emergency Grant Program. Our grant review process is nearly complete. As of yesterday afternoon, we've approved more than 4,700 businesses for grants. That's more than $46 million of the $50 million that went into the grant fund. Our team is sending contracts out to the businesses as quickly as we possibly can. Those are the grant agreements that they're to sign and return to us. And as often as 100 to 150, sometimes more per day. And as a point of reference, back in mid-April, we were sending out only around 20 to 25 per day. The comptroller has issued checks to nearly 2,000 businesses so far, totaling $19.1 million. As we got further into the review process, it became clear that the applications we received on March 23rd and 24th were going to use up most of the $50 million. That includes about $1.2 million, which is going to the nonprofit community. Slide 3, please. We received far more applications than we could provide funding for. With the $50 million that was put into the fund, we could only fund about a quarter of the more than 20,000 applications that we received, which totaled over $195 million. We've heard from many businesses, and I know many of you have heard from constituents who were concerned about their applications, that they were lost or were being ignored because they hadn't heard anything for weeks. So I want to make a few quick points about the duration of the application process. Normal metrics can't measure this program. The pandemic is not a normal time. Before the pandemic, we did not have a system or program in place to provide money to those businesses this quickly. We have business assistance programs, but none that receive thousands of applications in just a couple days. The infrastructure just quite simply was not there. We had to build it as we went along, and it did take time. It took a couple of weeks for our vendor to build the new IT system. Then we needed to bring on a team of 152 employees from other state agencies to help us review applications. This was in addition to the more than 100 commerce personnel reassigned to these programs alone. We basically doubled the size of the department, and we had to train them and get them up to speed. I also want to say that some recent news articles have described these personnel as volunteers. I want to clarify that these individuals that came to the Department of Commerce were qualified state employees who had employment and were working remotely from our sister state agencies. Even with the dozens of employees who borrowed from their agents, we felt the best use of our time and resources was to get the grants taken care of first. That was the most immediate need. There were federal programs at that point in time that were put into place in order to be able to handle loan programs. We felt that grant programs was the priority for the state. We started reviewing applications when we began accepting them in late March and got up to speed with our new help from our other sister agencies in the second week of April. Each application and its supporting documents needed to be reviewed by human eyes. Many came from businesses that had never applied for a grant or loan like this before. It's not necessarily, if you're a small business owner, an intuitive process. So many applications we received didn't have all of the documentation needed or weren't sure what to provide. Rather than just deny those and move on, we wanted to work with our applicants and help them get it right. These are our mom and pop shops and our neighborhood restaurants. But going back and forth with applicants also took a little time. No one is happy that businesses waited weeks to find out if they were getting a grant or not. Certainly not me. But it took time to build the system and get it running. We're doing everything we can to do it correctly and efficiently. We have to do our due diligence. We have to do it right by applicants, and we have to do right by taxpayers. After all, it's taxpayer money we're dispersing. In a normal year, the combined value of all commerce financing programs is about $130 million. So in 3 months, we'll be pushing out nearly as much funding as we normally do in a year. And we're trying to process around 5 times the normal number of applications we usually handle in any given year. Slide 4, please. We are continuing to process our applications that we received and to identify those that meet all the criteria to receive grants. If more money is eventually put into the fund, these businesses won't need to reapply and won't lose their place in line. We'll be able to pick up right where we left off and start sending out final paperwork so we can issue checks quickly. Our business development team is also in touch with our local jurisdictions, many of whom have or are setting up their own relief funds. We'd like to be able to connect with some of our applicants with these local programs since we've already done a lot of the legwork and verification. Hopefully, that would mean a shorter review process period for these local programs because they don't need to duplicate their work. At Commerce, we also completed an emergency procurement to bring on additional accounts payable staff to help complete the dispersal process. Slide 5, please. We had our review team prioritize the grant applications so that we could get that money out the door as soon as possible. Part of the thinking on that was, as I stated earlier, that the loan money available through federal resources like EIDL and the Paycheck Protection programs, but not as much grant money was available through the federal programs. And this cap for this program was lower. We could get assistance to a bigger pool of businesses faster. We are focusing on loans now as the grant process winds down. The loan process includes additional financial review because this is money that the state expects to be repaid. We need to know the money will come back. So far, we've approved 1,287 loans that we received on March 23rd and March 24th, totaling over $59 million. Again, the applications we received in this first 2 days, March 23rd and 24th, are expected to encumber all of the $75 million that has been put into the fund. Slide 6, please. There was a question about the process that we had used in order to be able to process the grants and the loans. This is a process that we're happy to discuss it now or at a later time during our questioning so that everybody has an understanding of the steps that were involved in processing both the grants and the loans. Slide 7, please. Commerce introduced the $5 million Maryland COVID-19 Emergency Relief Manufacturing Fund to incentivize our state's manufacturers to produce personal protective equipment, PPE, as we all know it now, such as face masks, as well as ventilators and other types of equipment. We received more than 230 applications totaling almost $18 million. We are now focusing on getting grants out the door. We have approved $3.7 million in grants to 52 manufacturers already. 42 checks have been sent, totaling almost $1.5 million. Companies are making face shields, masks, gowns, ventilators, and ventilator components, battery packs, and other PPE that is on the critical needs list for the Department of General Services for procurement purposes, as well as our Maryland Emergency Management Association and the Department of Health, who determines that those critical needs items. Slide 8, please. Something important about this manufacturing grant program is that only 50% of each grant was paid to the companies up front. The remainder is paid when the work is completed. This is a check on them that helps ensure that the state is getting return on our investment. PPE is important for our healthcare workers and for our businesses trying to reopen. They need PPE for their employees in order to maintain a safe workplace and to ensure safe interactions with customers. To help businesses meet this need, we worked with the Maryland Manufacturing Extension Partnership, MEP, to establish the Maryland Manufacturing Network portal. This connects grantees and other manufacturers and suppliers from the state to a broader platform for buyers. It supports the procurement needs of the public-private organizations across Maryland. This is one of the programs that I am extremely proud of, and it has worked very, very well. Slide 9, please. Support for the arts is another critical part of the Department of Commerce's mission. We have not forgotten about the arts during this pandemic. The Maryland State Arts Council established a $1 million grant fund and has dispersed that money to 64 arts organizations and 61 individual artists to help them through this very difficult time. Some of this funding came through the National Endowment of the Arts as part of the Federal CARES Act. Arts remain and always will remain an important economic generator for the state and vital to our quality of life. Slide 10, please. Now I'd like to move into some of the recovery phases as according to the governor's roadmap to recovery. And slide 10 illustrates the beginning of that. And as I'm sure we all know, we are currently in stage 1 of Governor Hogan's 3-stage plan to gradually relax restrictions and to reopen the state. So what does that mean? Stage 1 means the statewide stay-at-home order is lifted, although some jurisdictions have left their own orders in place for now, but I do believe that we're all on track for that stay-at-home order to be lifted. But no jurisdiction can loosen the restrictions beyond the governor, what he has announced. Stage 1 includes guidelines for the safe opening of retail stores, manufacturers, some personal services such as barbershops and salons, car washes, pet groomers, places of worship, etc. As of last Friday, youth sports, outdoor pools, and outdoor dining at restaurants could resume with restrictions, including that people must stay a safe distance, and we all have heard a lot about social distancing. Restaurant staff must wear masks and gloves. Menus could be either single-use or sanitized after use. Pools can be open at 25% of capacity if they adhere to sanitation protocols. Youth sports activities have to limit touching and focus on training and drills rather than competition. And day camps for young people throughout the summer must check youth and staff for COVID-19 systems daily, and everyone must wear masks. Slide 11, please. I want to make an important note about masks, which we want to make sure all of our businesses remember. The executive order mandating face coverings is still in effect. you must wear a mask in a retail establishment or on public transportation. It's still a good idea to have them in other situations when you leave the house. Cloth coverings are fine. Surgical masks or N95s are critical supplies that should be reserved for healthcare workers and first responders. Some people, like children under 2 and people with disabilities that would make it difficult to remove a mask, do not need to wear face coverings, per the Americans with Disabilities Act. If businesses encounter someone who says they can't wear a mask, they cannot interrogate that person or ask them for documentation of proof. They do need to try to accommodate these folks with curbside service, personal shopping to reduce their exposure to the store or delivery. Slide 12, please. All of this information can be found on the Department of Commerce Back to Business website. This contains a wealth of information for businesses regarding reopening. We're updating it regularly as restrictions are eased. This site offers industry-specific guidance and best practices about how to keep their employees and customers safe as they get back to work. We have different one-pages for industries like accommodations, restaurants, golf courses, marinas, manufacturers, retail establishments, etc. As an example, you can see here an excerpt from our manufacturing guidance on the slide. Slide 13, please. The website also features the Maryland Strong Back to Business Pledge. This indicates that businesses will adhere to protocols such as physical distancing, hand washing, and flexibility and training for employees. We are urging businesses to sign and post the pledge in their establishment. This will not only help maintain safety and cleanliness, but it will build confidence among customers and employees. We want this to help people feel more secure when they go out. Just as a reference, we have had roughly 6,000 downloads of that customer or Back to Business pledge that has been signed from our website. So, Mr. Chair, we can proceed on to slide 14, which says that I'm happy to take any questions moving forward about any of these topics that are in consideration.
Thank you very much. I'll bat lead off, so to speak, a couple of questions. I'm assuming that does the Economic Matters Committee staff have a copy of this presentation? Or if not, can we get?
As far as the slides are concerned?
Slides
okay.
We have.
Got it. Council says we have it, so that's that one. I'm wondering, on slide 2, you mentioned that 46.1 the $50 million through June 2nd has been, I guess, has been allocated. What about the remaining, I guess, 3.9? Is there a timeline or time frame you all are targeting to get the remaining money approved?
Yeah, so we specifically did not go immediately up to the $50 million mark. As you can see in one of the following slides where it talks about the process of where the different applications could be in the different parts of the process, we wanted to be able to make sure that we could find all of those queues where those applications could have been sent if there was additional resolutions that needed to be made, et cetera, that we may not have gotten information back from the applicants before we identified and notified those additional applicants that may have gone past the midday on March 25th for the grants. We wanted to make sure that we were true to our word to do first come, first serve, which did not necessarily happen in the first couple of weeks. And when we identified that problem, we needed to be able to rectify it so that we could really pull out all of those first applicants to be in line with what the intent was of the program.
I got just one more, and then I know the members want to ask, so I'll get out of the way. But I had gotten a number of, I guess, calls or emails, so forth, from members of the Legislative Black Caucus. I was just wondering, what has been the interest in the grants and loan for MBEs and other minority or women-owned businesses? What assistance have we been able to do for those entities?
You know, Mr. Chair, we really don't have good data on this at this point in time. On the grant application and loan application, it was not a requirement to acknowledge whether or not you were an MBE or a women-owned business or some sort of disfranchised business. That was not a requirement. So at this point in time, it would be probably not prudent to report on that type of data because it would be incomplete and possibly incorrect. I would say we would have a better opportunity, like we do with other programs within the department, to be able to, once the process is complete, to be able to report out on the data that we have been able to collect from those businesses. But right now, it's just not the time in order to be able to do that.
Okay. Delegate Watson, are you up?
Thank you, Chairman Davis. Secretary Schulz, thanks for being here with us today. Just a couple quick questions to clarify what you said during your presentation. Are the grants and loans two different processes, or do they go through the same process and then are they approved together, or do you put them through a second process for the loans if they apply for both?
The grant application and the loan application are two separate applications. The department prioritized the grant application because most of the grant applications and loan applications, well, they have to be filed at different times. Most of the loans, because there was more financial documentation that had to be presented with that due to the repayable status of that, will take additional review. But there are obviously less loans since the maximum amount that could be requested in a loan is $50,000 and the grant is $10,000. There is obviously a different number that we will come up with the number of loans that will be available to be funded.
Okay, so two different applications and two different processes based on what you were looking for each. Do you have a timeline?
Correct. There were different eligibility requirements for each.
Understood. Do you have a timeline when you think that you will be finished going through the existing loans that you're trying to get out?
Well, it depends on what you say about trying to get out. I would say that we're making great progress with the number of loan agreements that we're going to be getting out, but we have got to also finish getting the grant agreements out.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying, I'm sorry, I guess what I'm just saying is do you have a sense of when you might be complete the process of dispersing the $125 million to businesses?
I'm hoping that by the end of this month, we will have had the vast majority that are gone out.
By the end of June?
That's what I'm hoping right now. I have my team now that the process has gone through an expedited process. And we have a new process that we're putting together where we can send out a greater number of grant agreements or loan agreements at one time, that we can continue to process those with the comptroller's office. I do want to state, though, that because it does have to go to the comptroller's office, they have been very good and very responsive about getting to us. But the grant process we have seen has taken a little bit of additional back and forth, again, resolution time, in order to be able to make sure that the grantees, amongst other things, put the proper address on their documentation. So we have another team of people now that we're getting bounce backs from the comptroller's office and non-delivered checks that we have to go back to make sure that the grantees have indeed put the correct address on. So I'm giving you this information about a timeline, but I'm telling you that because it is all based on whether or not everything on the grant application is absolutely 100% accurate, that there may be some delays.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And last question, Mr. Chair. Secretary Schulz, we do understand that you were in a difficult position, and any agency would be in your shoes trying to stand up a tremendous grant and loan program quickly for this amount of money and this number of businesses. So We do empathize with that. We do understand that you want to get the money out to people as quickly as possible. But we still have the problem where it's been, in my opinion, an unacceptable delay getting the funding to businesses, and also an unacceptable lack of communication to the businesses, so they can't plan. They don't know if they're getting the loan, so they can't make decisions about any remaining money they have. And so it's been difficult, and you're well aware of that. At this point, is there anything that you can think of that you could do, or we could do, or help you do to make this a better process should we have to go through it again? For example, if there's a second wave, what resources might you need? How could we speed this up working in partnership?
Well, I have no idea that if there is a second wave, that we are this team, and then in addition to the team of our state employees from our other sister agencies, really know how the process works at this point in time. And I will say that that has been the greatest challenge, not the number of people working on the process, but the number of people understanding how the process actually needs to work. And being able to explain that to all of the stakeholders that are involved has indeed been challenging at times. But I will say that we have made such great success and progress in, especially in the last couple of weeks, identifying what some of those possible pitfalls could be, that I think that if there's another round of funds, that it would definitely be very, very quick in order to be able to get the funds out. But I just want to state, and I know that there's a broad wealth of knowledge on the Economic Matters Committee, and I really respect and understand everybody's private careers that they have had as well. But understanding that when you put out a major IT system, typically you have a period of time to do some testing and some analysis prior to. But because of the significance of what we were trying to do in order to be able to help the business community, we were really finding all of those, I guess, in IT world, those bugs in the system as we were moving forward. So our messaging was related to what we thought would, in the beginning, how the process would work. As we saw some technical difficulties and some ways that applications could go in different areas, we had to change our messaging on the fly as well. So we did that, I believe, expeditiously. We did that in the best interest of the business community and to be able to provide some level of support. And was it perfect? Nope, it absolutely was not perfect. Has it gotten 80 times better? Yes, it's gotten 80 times better. But we will continue to learn and perfect that system moving forward because we think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I've gotten a few texts from you guys. If you know of anybody who's trying to get in and was unable to, I believe they fixed the link. So there's a new link up. If you just want to reply and tell them to click the link now, they shouldn't have any trouble getting in. And with that, I'd like to go, if Delegate Mouts is with us, I'd like to go to Delegate Mouts. And if Delegate Mouts is not with us, then I'd like to go to Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary Schulz, and thank you for joining us in our community for one of our online town hall meetings. I think a lot of the concerns that I've had to some extent reflected in Delegate Watson's questions. I also just want to make sure that it sounded like you were saying that when you get the reports back from some of these businesses, you'll have an opportunity to find out how much of the money was distributed to minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, as well as the different sizes of businesses that received the funds. I just want to confirm that that's the case and that you'll be able to share that information with us and with the general public once you're able to get that follow-up data.
Sure. So I will just talk about the size of the businesses first. So yes, I can guarantee you that 100% of the businesses are between 2 and 50 employees because that was the size standard of the eligibility. So anybody that had more than 50 employees was not eligible to move forward in the process.
Sorry, within that, what I meant was, thank you for that. And I think that was a good, I appreciate that. But what I mean is within the 2 to 50, you know, we had a lot of small mom and pop shops, 2, 3, 4, 5 that struggle.
Right. Yes.
Will we know that?
Right. The second half of my statement was going to be that we can certainly do that. And then we will be able to also look at the size of the businesses when it applied versus the size of the business where it is right now.
Thank you.
And so that may be a big difference. And I'll just go back to the minority business status. We can look at that for those individual businesses that chose to check off that box, but it was not a requirement to check the box on the application as far as their business status. So the information that could be provided will probably be incomplete because not all businesses filled out that information. So that's just my my red flag to this committee and to others that are asking similar questions.
Okay. I had one follow-up question, which is, I think that we're all aware that there just wasn't enough money to go around because of the incredible struggle of the reality of shutting down everybody's business overnight and it was a necessary. I mean, I agree with the stay-at-home order decision and frankly think we opened up a little too fast. But the question is about what else can be done that could support small businesses now. And I mentioned this to you briefly in another call, and I just want to check in with you on the possibility. You know, for a lot of very small businesses, they're really struggling to pay their rent. They've got back rent now. They may have had some flexibility. And I've talked to the Maryland Bankers Association and tried to see if there's ways. I'm reaching out to the Commercial Property Owners Association, tried to see if there's ways to work with banks, commercial property owners, and tenants kind of in a joint effort to so that there could be both flexibility on the mortgage at the same time as flexibility on the rent, especially for these very small businesses that kind of still may not make it through. And I really want to say that it would be helpful, I think, to have leadership from the state level, and would welcome the opportunity to work with you on those kinds of efforts that wouldn't necessarily cost the state money, but where the state might be able to support in encouraging and coordinating those kinds of things, really to keep these businesses alive and hopefully thriving soon.
Well, I definitely think that those are important parts of the conversation that both of us need to continue to have. I think that, I guess as grateful as I am that our federal delegation has been as supportive for the state of Maryland as they have been, and I'm grateful for the continuing conversations with them about new and additional types of programs coming through the next round of CARES Act funding. And we've been, we have had a significant amount of money that has come in through those programs as well. And I just wanted to be able to make sure that, you know, we can identify those as about almost $1 billion of funding that has come in from the EIDL programs, and almost $10 billion that has come in through the PPP program through SBA, and that was benefiting over 72,000 businesses in the state of Maryland. So I think it's going to be a group effort. I don't think that there's a way that it can't be a group effort. And as I stated, there's also those county programs, county plus Baltimore City, that have CARES Act funding that have come through the CARES Act and come through the state of Maryland, that they are now putting together their business relief programs as well. And so they have funds after our funds, and we want to be able to make sure that we can provide those applicants that may have applied to us at the Department of Commerce and giving them their information to the local jurisdictions. We have been working with several local jurisdictions to be able to make sure that they have those applications on hand if those applicants were not able to be funded. But yes, there'll definitely need to be continued conversation, Delegate.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, I'd like to go back. We're going to give Delegate Mouts another swing at the plate here, and he'll be followed by Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Chairman. And my question is a little off the topic of the presentation, Madam Secretary. There's been a lot of confusion in reopening efforts, and this has come down at the local level, where our health departments are caught in the middle of executive orders that are being made and there isn't clarity. And so they're being put in a place where it seems like they're making the law, but that's really not what they do. They enforce the law. They're a regulatory body. And that kind of goes to the task force that are administered. I believe some are in Commerce and some are in the governor's office, and the transparency around the decisions that are made that go into the executive orders. My questions are two-part. First, are you aware of those issues that are impacting our local health departments? And two, what transparency or what guidance or clarification can you give us with regards to these decisions that are being made and what's going into them, so we can better understand what the governor's executive order, what these orders are supposed to legally look like when they're implemented in the field?
Sure. So I'm happy to address that, understanding that a lot of that clarification comes from the governor's office, delegate. But so the Department of Commerce really informally at first started putting together some advisory groups made up of very specific industry groups. And we started with the tourism big picture industry at first because they were the first and hardest hit, and they continue to be so. And it was internal staff at the Department of Commerce that started reaching out to their stakeholders and their groups just to start having the conversation around at the end of March, just to start talking through and getting businesses to have a platform to talk about what they could do, what they wanted to do, some of the hurdles, et cetera, as to when reopening might occur. So those advisory groups expanded outside of the tourism spectrum and went into manufacturing and construction and professional services and personal one-on-one services, et cetera, with the intent of them being able to help the Department of Commerce staff come up with some kind of recommendations as to what some of those hurdles, barriers, recommendations could be for reopening. So the advisory groups at the Department of Commerce were specifically put together by department staff in order to say, hey, if the restaurant industry, for example, would to reopen, this is what we're saying as industry leaders we could do, and we can do without great barriers in order to be able to protect the safe and healthy environments of our employees and the general public. So we gathered up all of those reports, and on May 1st, we sent all of those industry reports to the governor and the governor's team so that they could review them and so that he could have some idea of recommendations of best practices that these industries could do through the reopening process. The governor's recovery task force team is separate from the Department of Commerce. Those are individuals made up of healthcare professionals, doctors, and the business community. When we put our reopening recommendations forward from the Department of Commerce, we included, as they were sent to the governor's office, we included the Maryland Department of Health so that they could, at the State Department of Health, look at the recommendations and make their own other specific recommendations so that we could make sure that CDC guidelines, et cetera, were being addressed. And I will say in most cases they were. And so the businesses and other interests that were involved in the advisory group really did a wonderful job in coming up with some great standards. And so we're very appreciative of those standards. So when the governor looks to make some decisions about what the next phases of reopening and recovery are going to be, we look at some of those best practices, which, by the way, are very similar to the best practices in other states and obviously CDC guidance, et cetera, so that everybody has that understanding. I don't think that I have gotten any communication from any businesses at this point in time that they were unhappy with some of the best practices that we've posted on our Back to Business website. But if there is some concern, I would say, please share that. And so if there is local public health officials that have a different interpretation of what the executive order is, we work very closely with the Department of Health every single day and their senior leadership in order to be able to make sure that everybody is interpreting the guidance and the best practices uniformly. So if your local jurisdiction has some questions, then if they want to send it to us, we have a shared email account at the department so that there's multiple agencies looking and addressing these questions every day, all day. And that's at secretary.commerce@maryland.gov.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for the work they've done, because I know a lot of work has gone into the details of this effort. But there are a number of issues that come up, and I appreciate you explaining that to me. And as they come up, I'll forward them to you in the future. But I don't want to hijack this hearing. I appreciate your answer. And
Absolutely. Delegate, and I'm just going to repeat it again, just so that everybody has it. And our team at Commerce, at Department of Health, Department of Labor, any business issue that you guys see from your constituents, I guarantee you that our team of state employees can get that addressed at secretary.commerce@maryland.gov.
If that answers the question, I'd like to go to Delegate Walker, then Delegate Brooks, and then Delegate Queen before coming back to Delegate Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Madam Secretary. Got two questions, and basically I'd like to get some explanation on your remarks I heard. First, regarding the grants that you gave to the arts, the $1 million in grants to the arts, were those to artists or were those to art organizations that support the arts?
Both. And there was a press release that went out in regards to that, so we could make sure that you get all of that information. And what it was is we had some funding through CARES Act, as I had said, from the National Endowment of the Arts that had come to the states. And we pulled together some of our additional revenue funding that would have gone out to the arts, and we pulled together $1 million to be able to make sure that we could put that out to the different organizations that were in a crisis mode at this point in time.
Sure. I mean, I like the organizations. I'm just thinking, if I'm an artist, a struggling artist, how do you ensure they're not getting unemployment as well as receiving this type of grant?
We can make sure that we get you all of that information.
Sure.
Some of the issues with the unemployment insurance, with the Pandemic Unemployment Act, there were certain people that were not focused within that, and we wanted to be able to make sure that it was all inclusive for the arts community. However, I will say that we did not have in our other grant and loan programs either, just as full transparency for this, there was no restrictions for, at the beginning on March 23rd, 24th, or throughout, those organizations that were applying to be discredited or made ineligible because of any additional federal, state, or local funding that they were getting at that point in time.
Okay. Maybe that's something we look at if there is a phase two, like Delegate Watson was saying earlier, because I know it's a small pot. We want to be able to spread it to all those that need it. My second question is regarding the contracts with the PPE companies. So, we know the manufacturers. Were these contracts just awarded to companies that were based here in Maryland from your office, or was it nationwide?
Yes, Maryland manufacturers. And so I just want to make a distinction between this, delegate, and that's a good question. So our grant fund was for Maryland-based businesses. Any procurement that's happening outside of the Department of Commerce is separate to that conversation. So I can't really address how procurement is working for the state. But as far as the grant fund was concerned, those were Maryland-based businesses.
And obviously, I know in times like this, it's just, you wanted to hurry up and get the stuff out there to keep them going. So the geographic distribution really didn't play a part in that, did it? It was just...
ironically, it was a part of the consideration. And I think that is very telling as to the manufacturers that had applied. They're obviously those manufacturers that are in kind of the manufacturing hubs. I don't know if you have received, that is one thing that we do have, and we sent out, I think, just another press release on it as well for the manufacturers that have received funding, and we'll make sure that the committee gets that as well.
Thank you.
Delegate Brooks, Delegate Brooks, Delegate Queen, Delegate Watson, and Delegate Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Madam Secretary, for this briefing. On your second slide, you stated that the review team has prioritized the grant applications to get the fund distributed as quickly as possible. I'm somewhat curious about how do you prioritize? Is it prioritized by request amount, or prioritized by date received, or prioritized by the number of employees? How does that process works?
So the grant application specifically, Delegate, is we prioritize them over the loan applications. So there's two separate processes that are going forward: the grant application and the loan application. So in order to be able to get the grants out quicker, we utilize the resources that we had with our additional staff to be able to work on the grant applications first. So that's what I meant by prioritizing. But the process and the program was set up from the very beginning in order to process first in and first out. So from the very beginning, the only thing that we looked at with the grant applications was those applications that were applied for on March 23rd and 24th. And we have identified about half of the day on March 25th where applications could go out as well.
And one last follow-up question: the amount of the grant, how do you determine that?
Well, the eligibility requirements were such that they had to show some type of a loss due to COVID events, and their applications could be on the grant program up to $10,000. So that was part of the review process, and it's for the types of financial documentation that they had to include with their grant, which, because many were very small mom and pop shops, as I have heard it called today, many of those applications were just because of the size of the business, right? They've never had to apply for a grant or a loan in the past. So the financial documentation that they had sent to the department was not sufficient, but their business otherwise qualified. So we had to, within our process that you have seen on one of the slides, we had to create a resolution process so that we had a team of people working with these businesses in order to be able to come up with the appropriate financial documentation for them to prove, I guess, and the eligibility of their business based on the laws.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for coming in. We really appreciate the feedback and information. My question, I think it was around slide 3 or 4, where you talked about we've received over 20,000 applications, and I believe it was about 195 million that it totaled, where we've only have allocated 50 million. And so that's a very significant gap. And so I guess my question is, how realistic is it for us to even think we're going to make a dent in that? I know you're talking about working with the local jurisdictions and maybe another CARES Act supplement, but where do we think we realistically will be with that? Any thoughts on that?
At this point in time, I don't have significant thoughts on that, Delegate, except to say that we're going to try to work with as many of those applicants as we can in order to be able to get funding through the counties and the local jurisdictions. We purposely went through and reviewed those applications of those applicants. We know that not all 20,190 applications were allowed to move forward. Some of those applications were duplicates. Many of those, I would say, oh gosh, I don't have the final numbers in front of me. So around between 1,500 and 2,000 of those applications were duplicate applications. Perhaps a small business was unsure and they had not heard, so they put in another application. So we were able to, through the process, look at those to be able to make sure that we were dealing with all one-time applications. But we purposely left that process moving forward so that if we were able to get additional funds from the federal government, that we could put funding there to be able to satisfy those remaining applications. And it would be at a quicker response rate.
But what's a realistic number? Are we thinking we're going to get another 100 million from the government or 50 million from local? I mean, I just wanted to get a ballpark of what
Delegate, I apologize for you on that, and I can try to come up with a number at some other point in time, but at this point in time, I would be hesitant to say what a realistic number is right now, considering Congress is still moving forward with debates on the next round of CARES Act funding. I'll just say, for those on the phone, we have been very supportive in pushing the concept of CARES Act funding coming to the state and local level, as opposed to only going through the Small Business Administration through their programs. We think that we can be more nimble and identify the needs of our local businesses more so than the federal government's programs, which, as we have all seen and heard on the news, have been somewhat restrictive for certain types of businesses. So the governor has been, as the chair of the National Governors Association, being very adamant about the need to be able to provide those resources directly to the state.
All right. Delegate Queen, are you good?
Thanks.
All right, let me go to Delegate Watson, Delegate Wilson, and then Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Schulz, did the applications request information about whether or not the applicants, the businesses applying for the grants and loans, had received or applied for the EIDL or the PPP loans?
No, as a matter of fact, the PPP loan didn't even exist when our application went out.
Okay, and so we won't know then of the number of businesses that were funded, how many had access to those other types of loans through the federal government.
As far as I can tell, with the type of data that we have collected, I do not believe we will know that, but as soon as we finish this process of getting the funds out, we can go back to look to see if there is a way to identify that.
Okay, and if we have a second round, if you're able to fund this, that's, I think, one important consideration is that some businesses, for whatever reason, didn't qualify for EIDL or PPP, but could have qualified for the Maryland grant and were shut out because they didn't happen to be, first. So something to keep in mind in the future is how we can, if we have a second round, how we can take care of the businesses that haven't received the federal funding. Finally, will you be making or giving us as a committee or making public a list of the businesses that have received the grants and the loans?
I believe, just like with all of our other programs within the department, once we are completed with the project in this process of getting the funds out, and we know that it's a complete list and it's an accurate list, it's certainly a matter of public record. I'm hesitant to do so when we are in the middle of the process, because it might put some businesses on high alert if their name is not on there, and we want to be able to make sure that we have a complete list.
I understand, and I can appreciate that. I just have one other quick thing, sorry, Mr. Chair, and that is, I really would like you to consider, Secretary Schulz, if there is a way of combining the grant and loan application and the review so that you're doing one process instead of two. You don't need to reply or comment now, but I do think there are ways to do that, and that might help save time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our last two questions, starting with Delegate Wilson and then Delegate Chi, will close us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, again, appreciate the yeoman's work that you and your crew have been performing. My question comes about, it's a two-part question, mainly when it comes to the RFPs put out for the PPEs, the procurement opportunities. Did you at all work with the Governor's Office of Minority Affairs, GOMA, and to see what, if any, minority businesses or minority enterprises were involved and could have participated in that effort? And secondly, I'm sure this, not something you can do now, but at some point in the future, to be able to provide a list of all the businesses, the Maryland businesses that received those contracts, and especially the minority businesses, if there were any.
Delegate, thank you for that question, but that is not a question for the Department of Commerce. We can see if the Department of General Services can respond to that question for you, but the only thing that the Department of Commerce was involved in with any type of businesses that were looking at procurement was in order to be able to vet those businesses that had gone through MEMA's resource center. And so we had individuals from the Department of Commerce making sure that they were indeed valid businesses and could actually produce what they could produce. So the Department of Commerce was not involved in the procurement process other than that.
So you guys, beyond basically validating them to be operating businesses, had no input on which businesses should or should not get those contracts?
So, Delegate, the Department of Commerce never has an
Sure.
input into what happens with state procurement. So I would say no, we were there to be able to assist the normal procurement process in the state.
Thank you very much.
Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, I'll make the question very quick, and thank you. I want to know how a business can quickly check their status if they're still waiting.
Well, they can go to the One Stop platform, which does have up-to-date information. They can make sure that if they do not have access to the One Stop system, and they should all be aware of that by now, we have seen many businesses who may be checking from different email addresses. Maybe they have multiple email addresses and they need to be able to find out that the system is available to them at the email address in which they applied for, and that it was in a correct email address. If they do not have any information on checking their status, then they can certainly send an email to our team, and we will send that email address out to the committee, but it is, and they should have that email address as well, but it is, I'll just give it to you real quick here. It's COVID-19 application. So it's COVID-19.application@maryland.gov. And we'll make sure that the committee staff has that email address for them to access.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
You're very welcome, Delegate.
All right, guys, as I had indicated prior to the start, I knew Madam Secretary had to leave us at 3 to take another call. So I wanted to say two things. First of all, Madam Secretary, thank you for joining us. The information has been helpful, and certainly the slide presentation we'll use. Secondly, I know Delegate Ahrens couldn't stay with us. He and some others had some questions that they submitted to the office that I'm not sure that we got to all of them. So what I'd like for any that were not answered, we will be sending a letter over hopefully before the end of the week or by the end of the week. And then if you can, or your staff can just respond to those and get back with us, I think that'll, wrap up this portion in terms of any initial questions we have, and maybe we can get back together later in the room to see where we are. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We are very pleased to answer any questions that come from this committee or other legislators. And I very much appreciate this opportunity and understanding the constraints that all of you are under and the pressure that you're receiving from your constituents as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to partner in this operation.
Thank you very much. Guys, without further ado, I just want to again say thank you. I know that there's a lot going on. Our world is very busy these days, and there's a lot going on, but I thank you for taking time out to stop in on, this most important discussion. And you will be hearing from us again throughout the interim, certainly throughout the summer, as as the need arises or as different issues come up. So thank you all very much. Take care. Be safe.